Originally slated as a launch game for the PS3, Lair has been a long time coming. After multiple delays, the dragon-based flight game is finally ready for fantasy fans eager to rain fire from the skies and munch on enemy soldiers. But is this the thrilling masterpiece players have been waiting for? Or has this beast bitten off more than it can chew? Lair tells the story of a world with shrinking resources, ravaged by volcanoes and war. Players take control of Roan, a dragon rider in service to the nation of Asilia. After several battles between the Asilians and the Mokai, the two sides sit down to discuss peace. However, religious zealots in the Asilian leadership murder the negotiators to continue the war, leaving Roan to question what he's really fighting for.
We had an oath. Your oath is to follow orders, as is mine.
The tale touches on bigger themes like trust and genocide, but it's not too heavy-handed. Developed by Factor 5, the same company that made the Rogue Squadron series on the N64 and GameCube, elements of Lair look very similar to anyone that's played the company's previous games. The 15 missions feature crowded environments with multiple objects that are given to you on the fly. You may need to protect a group of bomb-dropping mantas, rip sections from a dam, or take down enemy dragons.
Asilian burners! Asilian burners! Over the ridge!
Most objectives are introduced by brief cinematics that establish key enemies or locations, but the scenes cut in a bit too often, frequently interrupting the gameplay to show something as simple as a lost ship or a crumbling bridge. The game also tends to pile on 3 or 4 goals at a time, forcing you to crisscross a level, keeping one threat at bay as another gains ground. With such large environments, so many targets, and only vague mission objectives, it can be difficult to determine where you need to be or which enemy needs to be destroyed.
Oh, those are dark dragons!
On one level, dark dragons enter the fray and you're commanded to take them down, but there's no decent way to locate them or distinguish them from the scores of the other enemy and allied dragons in the air. The game lacks a radar display, replacing it with a simple arrow that often disappears when you need it most. Dragon Vision offers minimal help by highlighting enemy forces, but even that function doesn't identify every target on screen. In all, Lair can be completed in about 8 or 10 hours, but like the Rogue Squadron games before it, the title encourages replaying levels by awarding medals based on stats such as completion time, friendlies lost, and tons of carnage. Throughout the entire game, you're limited to 2 dragons, which don't feel any different from each other. More steeds are unlockable, but you have to complete the game before you even gain access to the stables. There are also unlockable extras like music tracks, a behind-the-scenes documentary, and photos of Factor 5 employees having a picnic. The gameplay in Lair is easily its weakest trait. Steering your dragon is handled entirely by tilting the 6-axis. The basic flight controls are far from ideal, and there's no good excuse for forcing the scheme on players without giving an option to use the analog sticks. To make matters worse, 180-degree turns don't fare well at all. To turn around, you have to quickly pull the controller upwards, but attempts at the technique fail more often than not, with the motion either not registering at all or being confused for the boost input, which also requires a quick shake. Flying across the map is also a pain since you have to constantly tap the X button to keep your dragon at top speed. Combat in the game holds some variety. You can blast out large, powerful fireballs, fire rapidly for weaker shots, or hold the button to release streams of flames. The L1 and R1 buttons are used to lock onto enemies, but it's practically worthless. The reticle almost always locks onto the wrong target, and it moves from one creature to the next almost randomly. Engaging other dragons often results in fierce battles, which will have you clawing, biting, and burning your way to victory. Other times, you'll launch into a scene that's seemingly inspired by Hollywood car chases. 2 dragons fly alongside one another, and you have to line yourself up and jerk the controller to the left or the right to ram your opponent. The most cinematic dragon-to-dragon conflicts are called takedowns. When the takedown icon appears, you can begin the attack, initiating a series of on-screen commands that result in some of the coolest sequences in the game. Other targets require different techniques. You can land to engage a group of human soldiers, letting your dragon snack on a few along the way, giving it a health boost. Bridges can be destroyed by grabbing bombs from the backs of mantas, and giant war beasts can be dragged to the ground by snagging their legs with your chain. An obvious nod to the technique used in Factor 5 Star Wars games. Making matters worse, Lair's motion controls include the use of excessive waggle. To kill rhinos or rip apart structures, you have to latch onto them and vigorously pump the controller up and down until they're destroyed. It's an annoying technique, and in general, Lair's gameplay comes off as imprecise, confusing, and downright archaic. Lair's presentation is a case of lost opportunity. While the creatures look amazing, the game's graphics engine simply can't keep up with the hundreds of creatures and projectiles on screen. The frame rate is so inconsistent that it's sometimes hard to see your targets, and individual character animations are very choppy as well, especially from a distance. Your character's death animation is laughably stiff, and exploding objects just sort of pop in an unconvincing manner. The game suffers from awkward transitions, characters' voices get cut off by cinema scenes, it takes a few seconds for the game to load the pause menu, and when you complete a level, the picture freezes and then slowly fades to black. There are some disturbing bugs as well. The dragon's animations will sometimes lock up in face-to-face battles, and the camera can clip through the environment for several seconds before recentering behind you. On the upside, Lair does have a decent soundtrack, but chances are you'll be too distracted by how poorly the game runs to even notice it. Lair is one of the PS3's biggest disappointments so far. The potential was great, and the core gameplay isn't bad, but instead of the fantasy epic fans dreamed of, the final product comes across as a short and unsightly mess. It's pretty obvious that this game isn't done, with loads of ragged edges in almost every element of its execution.